Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Align, where we help you align with your true self, others, and your desired outcome to live your best life. Today, we have a very special guest, Chrissy Bellman, who we actually went to NYU studying together, met when we studied abroad. And Chrissy had, and I'll let you tell the story, but had an amazing idea to start a brand. I always call you the patent queen. That's how I introduce you to everybody that don't know you yet. So if you don't get surprised if it goes viral. It's like hashtag patent. But Christy had an amazing idea when we were, God, I don't know, sophomores and whatnot. And
Yeah,
now,
I think so.
sophomore, right? Okay. And
Yeah.
now has built a $1 million company. I mean, give it a couple of years, it'll probably be even worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But it's not so much about the money. It's so much more about the passion to success. So Chrissy, want to welcome you aboard to hear about the story.
Thank you.
So it took, go ahead.
No, go for it.
All right. No, I was going to say, like, first off, just walk us through, like, how did you come up with the idea with LEVO Oil? You know, what was the drive, the passion behind it? Let's start there.
I've to like friends and people close in my life, I've sometimes described as like the only spontaneous thing that I had done at that time in my life. I've since become much more spontaneous and it has impacted and changed me. But I was just like on that finance plan, just like you, and just grinding out school, doing that path when I just randomly had the idea when we were abroad, like you said. Yeah, like it was just a passing idea. I don't like to dwell too much on like this amazing light bulb moment because it really did just kind of happen randomly. But where I started to think about it and spend more time marinating on it was after I Google searched the idea, like how do you infuse oils? And I found just so many people talking about the concept, but no companies and no brands. So it just seemed like an awesome opportunity and I couldn't get it off my mind. So I started moonlighting it and then, a couple of years later, finally took the leap. So.
Love it. And so for those of people who don't know what LEVO Oil is, if you don't mind just kind of walking us through what is the product, how do you use it, and what would you say, how do most of your clientele use the product?
Sure. So the business is LEVO is the brand, but it's also, we don't really have a separate name for the product. So it's mostly been our core item has been this kitchen appliance that's a patented automated oil infuser. So similar to how you make coffee, where you walk up to the coffee machine, you put in water and coffee grinds. Instead, you put in oil, butter, vegetable glycerin, honey, ghee, whatever, and any kind of herbs. You can make rosemary butter, cannabis coconut oil, lavender, almond oil for a product for your face. You can make all sorts of items. And the epiphany was that an infused oil or like an infused glycerin or something can make everything from a household or skincare product to various like medicated foods. So it's a multi-purpose machine.
Got it. So obviously, as you mentioned, both you and I feel like everyone who comes out from an undergraduate business program that is like pretty much like a workshop into like a feeder system into finance or consulting.
Yeah.
I took the finance route, you took the consulting route. When you were in that seat, and you obviously had LEVO in the back of your mind or in front of your mind, how are you juggling the two? I mean, obviously, starting your own business is one big hurdle, and a lot of to do within that. Creating your own patent or getting things patented is also another layer of complexity. So, how did you make that leap, right? Because obviously you were doing well, comfortable, big, what our parents would be very happy with us staying there for, right? So
Oh, yeah.
walk us through your thought process.
Yeah, no, I definitely put my family through family and friends through quite the shock system once I was like pivot. Yeah, I mean, I was just truly moonlight hours. Like by the time I quit and decided to go full time on LEVO, I kind of had my life in a place where it was like a fork in the road. Like I had to shit or get off the pot, really. So yeah, at that time it was just kind of nights and weekends, and in the back of my head, like going to a restaurant supply store on Delancey Street and getting random products and like hacking them together or tearing them apart and seeing what they were made of. So I kind of went from this like prototypey, like, is there a product that could address this problem? Because I knew there was a brand and like a lifestyle brand opportunity in the concept, and like a ton of different ways you could address it. But I was like, can I address it in a core product? Can I have like something that gets you in the door? I think Peloton is like an amazing example of like, they got the bike in the door and it's like a whole other world of content and this big brand. But so yeah, I was trying to address that. So I was thinking about it a lot. And then in a literal sense, I was prototyping, then filing the IP. That was like one of the first things that I did. And it took me probably about 3 years to realize that most of this, oh, you have an invention, call us, or product design firms, this, that. I burnt quite a bit of my own money before realizing that those weren't going to be that wasn't really going to help me get a real supply chain in place. And also I wasn't going to be able to market the company full time, like without being full time on it. Like I thought for a while, like, oh, I'll just like make this invention, finance my own inventory, and have this like side thing that makes me extra money on the side and lets me do this cool thing and like kind of de-risk myself personally. I was really nervous about not being able to fund it. When you're like literally doing it, you need a lot of money to do it. So that was a nerve-wracking decision to get away from that.
Yeah. And I hear that's something that I would say a lot of friends of mine who are founders or, building something of their own. I feel like there's a fear of money, but also I've always wondered why not so many people try to take on some debt, right? Because if you look at even in a financial firm, right, how do you make that kind of return? Other people's money, right? Other people's cash flow. So were there specific reasons you think, or was it like, for example, culturally, I think it took me some time in my life to finally be like, oh, like having some sort of debt or, getting some sort of loan is actually not a bad thing. It's actually a smart way to use money. I mean, being Chinese, maybe it's a Chinese thing or an Asian thing, debt is seen as a bad element, right? Like, for example, people think we're crazy, but when we buy a house, we pay it all in cash. And we feel like a status that we made it versus I think Americans look at us like we're stupid. Like, why would you put all your cash up front, go invest it, right? Get a mortgage. So was there stigma behind getting a loan, or was it more just like, I want to do it on my own? I want to be fully.
Actually, I relate to that a lot. I was definitely raised with being very conservative in that way, being very practical, that it was like, maybe something inherently bad about it, but and like a very walk uphill 15 miles both ways type mentality. Like I was raised that way. So I would say that probably played a lot into it. Like it definitely didn't occur to me as an option at the time. But I think more so I was just really determined on whatever I saw the next step was, I had to make it happen. And I just felt like I needed to personally kind of guarantee that it could happen. Like getting any other stakeholders involved at the time to me was just occurring as like sort of a risk that it might not happen, or like, as long as it's within my control 100%, I will take the next step and the next step and the next step. So those things optimizing it didn't occur to me. Getting it done was like all that was on my mind.
Yeah, got it. Okay. Super practical, gunning it. Awesome. What was something you wish you knew before you started this journey that you think it would have, either things you wish you learned, a skill set, or like, for example, if we were at NYU Stern and we had this class or we learned more about that, I felt I would be more prepared. Anything you wish you knew or learned before you got into entrepreneurship?
I definitely would have. I mean, there was a lot of amazing things. I think our education was awesome. I'm pretty happy. I'm very happy with it. I'm so glad that we learned things about investor behavior and all that. In fact, I would say I would just have gone deeper into that. Like there's so much to, even working with like employees and any other people, like the people stuff is huge, knowing that like you can't give to get doesn't work. You've got to be in like perfect balance with people, whether that's an employee or an investor or this or that, like the whole time. There's that. And then I'm trying to think of what else. I mean, similar investor behavior or anything else. Engineers, investors, employees, people just, I think, taking action, the amount of angst and difficulty that causes for most people. I wish I don't live in any level of regret. It's been amazing the way I've learned it all, but it's definitely something that I'm learning more now that would have impacted the way I did things in the past. Is just like anticipating that people don't like to make decisions and accepting that. Like I've carried a decent amount of like frustration around that. But now I just accept that's part of the process. Like everybody gets most people get the heebie-jeebies when it really comes down to making a decision and taking an action. And I think that carrying that and not having an inflated expectation of what that's going to be like really helps.
Yeah.
And it helps you suss it out earlier. I mean, people, the more I get into this, the more you meet people who like are really sensitive about other people's time and try to get a no faster or things like that. Like I understand a lot around that now that I didn't in the beginning, but yeah, people don't like to take action.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I would have to echo you. I think first, I totally agree. I love NYU Stern was the best prep that I personally
Yeah.
could have had to get into anything in business, not just finance, right? One thing
Yeah.
I agree with you. I also tell like my mentees or people who are going through school now is take management classes extremely seriously. Like I think people always think, oh, it's the hard technical skills that we need to learn and run how to run through CAPM and DCF. Like, first of all, do we actually use CAPM in reality? I don't really think so. Number one. Number two, DCFs are oftentimes slightly made up, if I could be honest. And so, like, all of it's still more of a art than a science. But to your point, like, all that stuff could be learned, like on the job, right? The management, the people skills, it takes time. It takes a lot, right? Takes not just case studies, but it's also like real life things going through. So I completely agree with you. I think anyone who's going through school, even like MBA now, like take group stuff, group projects very seriously and management classes really seriously. Because that's gonna, if you can't influence at your level, right? If you can't influence as a CEO, as a leader, you won't be able to get anything done.
Totally. Yeah. And if you're clouded by your own self-perception and that's getting in the way and you just have these expectations of other people and what other people are like, then that's like really troublesome. We're all much more similar than we like to believe. So when you look at those data and those case studies, it's just very telling about behavior. So
yeah. I hear you. I want to dig a little bit because I was surprised to hear one of your bigger takeaways is that people don't like to take action. So we'll dig a little bit deeper on that. Is it because of inertia? People like to stick to what they're already doing. They don't want to pivot. Like, what have you kind of learned about people not wanting to take action?
I think it's like, what is it? Any decisions or a bad decision's better than no decision and things like that. I think that, I think it just is like peak accountability, peak fear, just forces all that to the surface. And it's surprising what level of decision might cause that, for employees, it might be a certain project and making decisions around that, or for an investor, it might be actually writing the check, or for me going full time, whatever the things are. I just think it's like when you have to sign the piece of paper, you have to do the thing. A lot of truth comes out there, or doesn't if it was all good to go from the start.
Got it.
Yeah, I just think there's a lot. I think it's a hard thing to take. So I think it's a great quality to look for.
Got it.
Who is involved? What's the general level of like downness around you? Like what is the level of like commitment? My CFO has a great saying, disagree and commit. Like, can you even like disagree and say like, okay, that's not my idea, but when I commit to it and we make the decision, I'll take it as if I did agree. So there's a lot of different ways to deal with it, but I think just like decisions and decision fatigue in a deal, whatever, I just think it's a general, who can take action and like get comfortable with that, who has the stomach for it. It's kind of like testing the stomach and just knowing and accepting it when it's not there. If it's not there, that doesn't mean it's like anything. It's just I think it's like a great lens to suss out whatever circumstances you find yourself in.
Got it. Super helpful. No, noted. Yeah, I feel like maybe because it's a matter of whether it be in our worlds of entrepreneurship or in finance and business, I feel like I tend to meet people that are, if anything, too action oriented, too decisive, too thinking, you know what I mean? But I think it's also self-selection bias, right? Like, because I personally am very much let's go, that I think I will like scare everyone away who's not decisive, right? So it's a bias element, but it's helpful to know that like there are a lot of people, to your point, out there indecisive, doesn't want to be held accountable for decision, and it's being in the gray sometimes is a little bit easier to stomach than having to own every decision you make. So here
and maybe it's like coming to your own, like, what do you need? I've talked with other entrepreneur friends and whatnot about this. And, maybe you're the type that needs to sleep on it. Maybe you're the type that getting to know how you find, a gut decision, how you check the decision and feel good about it too.
Love that. Love that. We talked about this before we started filming, about planning and how we joked about how we're giving up on planning in life because, life never really planned. Did you, in a way, plan, manifest, whatever you want to call it, building Levo to be a $1 million company? Or was it just, to your point, it was step by step, and I just had to make it work, and I just had to take the next step to make sure this would come to fruition? Did you have a vision for Levo that you've either intentionally or just, flowed your way through to build the company to where it is today?
I certainly still have just as big of a vision and the exact same one. In fact, the more time goes on, I go back to like my very original insights more and more and more. But yeah, I still feel it's always been a big idea in my head and a big opportunity for, a big global mainstream opportunity. I didn't know how to even quantify that. Like, I just knew it was really big. Like, I wasn't going to be, I wasn't thinking like a family business or a small time lifestyle business or something like that. Small times are really, I didn't mean to say it like that. That's not the idea I meant. But yeah, no, I always thought it was big. I just couldn't really quantify it. But I think I sort of had a misconception that I have grown out of on like where the execution comes in, because I think I sort of thought like, oh, if I do this right, or if I do this at all, it will be big. And what you learn more and more is like, no, there's so many decisions and so many actions that lead you to be able to like put the key in the lock, really, to do that. Like, I think great ideas are more important. I think some people would say the idea is nothing, it's all execution. I'm probably 50-50. I'm pretty high on the idea is really important, but definitely you have to be very intentional to grow big.
Yeah.
It is not just like you plant the seed and the tree grows,
Yeah.
But that exists to some extent. Like, I always, like, after the first year of Levo, when we first launched and it took hold fairly quickly, I kept thinking in my head, like dropping a match in the woods a little bit. But yeah, no, it's definitely always been big in my mind, but I'm still like, it's still on a day-to-day basis, it's all still very surreal to me. I'm still very like pleasantly surprised by lots of things. So I kind of live in the enigmatic nature of all of those things. So yeah, I guess to some extent manifested, but I don't know.
Having a vision, but obviously the day to day, you gotta put the feet on the ground. You gotta make it happen. Take that step.
Yeah, you're just in it,
Yeah.
and it's happening. I guess.
I love that. And one of many things, but I think one big thing for me, what I really respect about you is how much you care for not just your employees, but your suppliers, people in your distribution team, people that you partner with, your investors, like literally anyone in your ecosystem. You always want to do right by them. And you always want to make sure they're taken care of, right? Like, even everything down to structuring a deal. Like, you really care about things that honestly, in our world, you don't have to, right? You don't really owe anyone anything, right? But you go above and beyond. So talk to me about like your views about whether it be business relationships, like business karma, or just doing good. Like, why is that so important to you? Is it something that you also learn from your parents? Like, just hearing a little bit more about why you go above and beyond when you technically don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I guess it's like so normalized in my head. I don't really even think about it as like going above and beyond. It's just what's happening. But thank you for that. Certainly feels good to hear it that way. I guess I kind of think of like matter is neither created nor destroyed. Like, I just sort of think of all of the energy and try to have like some kind of, there's a little bit of woo that plays into it for me, I guess. But it's just kind of, whether, I guess it is a little karmic on some level. Like, it will all come around. I do believe that. Like, I try just not to get too distracted by the scrapes on the knees, and try to believe that it all comes back. But if it didn't and it kind of went somewhere else, that's okay too. But yeah, I do think it's really important. I just can't imagine being another way, I guess. And it hasn't always, it definitely is a great filter. Certainly it's not been all sunshine and rainbows. Definitely had, there's been the fallout. And sometimes it's peculiar when you feel like all of your good intentions still lead to that in different things. But I mean, it's definitely an area where doing this has taught me so much about life and brought me to the most incredible relationships. I mean, and even like other entrepreneurs and people in the community, like the generosity and the support and the altruism, honestly, that exists has been really, really interesting.
Love that. Speaking of the scrapes and the knees, not always rainbows and butterflies. And to your point about always having good intentions, but it may not always come out that way for better.
Yeah.
I always think it's for better. For at the moment, it could be for worse, right?
Right.
When you were, and I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, what hits the hardest is never like, oh, a deal doesn't go through or distribution's late and all these like, like little day-to-day stuff. It's betrayal. It's someone stabs you in the back that you really, really trusted. It's dishonesty. It's all these things like that, much more people related things that happen to you. And when something like that, as you pointed out, it does happen, especially as an entrepreneur. When you were at your darkest times with people, how did you pull yourself out of it? What was going through in your head? How did you get yourself out of it to continue to trust and give? Because I think think about, like, for example, not just business, but in relationships, right? It takes one bad relationship or one bad ex to ruin it for everyone else coming up, because you're always going to have that fear the next time, oh, is this going to happen again? So how do you prevent yourself from closing potentially great business opportunities or partnerships and staying open when you've been burned, when you've been hurt?
Yeah. Someone really important in my life, like about a year ago, talked about the idea of like, be alarmed if you meet a very regretful person. If someone's full of regret, just see that as an alarming thing and pay attention to it, just about where they are at that time. So I really try and have learned a lot about not living in regret, which is a huge part. I mean, when you have any of those moments, my first instinct generally when those things happen to me is to be super hard on myself and be pretty regretful. I think I have a natural tendency to take accountability, but it's not always productive for it. And it is ultimately, you are accountable, but it's like finding a way to make that empowering instead of very defeating. But I do, I definitely subscribe to all of those that all happen because of something that you were projecting onto the world, and you got what you were asking for in some way. And maybe it was just the lesson or the ride or whatever. So I think it's just refining that perspective and figuring out, like, what does it take for this not to become something regretful? Like, what does it take for this to be something that you grow from? But for sure, in the darkest hours that I've experienced so far, it has been like the key relationships and other things that have, bent time and done quantum leaps to make things happen. So, I'm fascinated by that, and I know it will happen more in the future. And I think that's like an awesome part of, sticking this stuff out, is to just to witness like basically miracles like that is amazing.
Yeah. And would you say, while we're gonna in our life have a few bad experiences or eggs, for the most part, to your point about the altruism, right? The random acts of kindness and giving that we do receive are way more. It's like multiples of the few bad eggs that we experience. Has that been your case as well?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah.
What would you, if you had to think about 1 up to 3 people in your life, you can name them, you can describe them, that you want to like completely thank, not completely, but on higher ranking, thank them for your success with LEVO, who will those people be? It doesn't have to be like they actually did something for you. It could be the way they thought, how they raised you. What are like 1 to 3 people that really made LEVO possible?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a hard answer because I have a very like elephant brain memory about very small, tiny things sometimes that really have this impact on me. So if I really went down the list and if you really were inside my head, you'd find just like these very small, seemingly extremely small things, and it'd be just like this never ending list. But um, I'd say that when I was in my like formidable adolescence, kind of like just honing in on, I was kind of not, I became more achieving when I was like in middle school. And then as like a teenager, I definitely had some impactful like mentorship and inspiration from a physics teacher in high school that just really opened my mind to the idea of constantly learning, like not just getting the A and not just achieving, but just like really learning. And I really got great results from that, but also enjoyed it a lot more and learned so much more in approaching it that way versus the whole like, study or prepare for something and then it all flies out of your head.
Yeah.
And that really was impactful. And then I'm also really interested in physics as a result for no reason. But then, yeah, so there's that. I guess that might be, now that I say it out loud, I'm like, maybe that's some of the makeriness ish something. But I am certainly blown away by all that kind of science and things. And then, yeah, I was a athlete and my coach was super impactful. I had kind of an unusual experience of being on the road quite a bit for that, and spending a lot of time around grown-ups. And I'm glad, to have had that. I knew it was an opportunity at the time, even when I was younger. I'm like, this is good for me because I've found myself around more experienced and older people. And as bizarre as it can be at different times, it's like hitting the fast forward button on experience. I was always like looking for more and more gray hair.
Mm.
I was also, again, like I'm very grateful for like my father's an extremely hardworking person. So like I'm not afraid to grind and to work hard, which is awesome. So grateful for that. And then yeah, I mean during Levo it's success because it gets questioned and tested every so often, right? And then there's just been amazing mentors, people that I never even knew existed because I didn't have a lot of exposure to entrepreneurship growing up and even through college because we were kind of on a different path, right? Like it wasn't that relevant. So the people I've met and the mentors I've met that actually understand what's going on, and have been able to help in really actionable ways along the way, unbelievable. And I couldn't have made up these characters. I didn't even know that they existed, back when. So yeah, so much amazing help.
Love that. You mentioned to me once that you wanted to, through Levo and through all the things that you will be doing in your life, you want to change the market's perception of, correct me if I'm wrong, if it was at small home appliances or something about like home goods, you want to change your market perception. Am I making something up or just this is really
I think I might have said something about hard goods or hardware
okay?
to that end.
Yes.
I mean, on the kitchen appliance front, and I think Levo's an interesting example of it, and I think it falls into most products, but like a lot of like utilitarian or practical products can, if you, there's a way that you can address a lot of demand around joy, right? Like Levo's, it's very functional and all that stuff, but it's really about like people's joy. So there's, and I think making products people like is incredibly important. And I think hardware is something that, when I started and got introduced to the startup community and all that, did feel like I ran into a lot of resources that were sort of like software oriented, which I totally get. I had done B2B software stuff before for 5 years before I started this. I totally understood why, like from a financial perspective, like why that is the case. But yeah, I'm certainly interested in removing some of the red tape from like idea to actually making like physical things. I think physical things bring a lot of joy to people.
Love that. Let's talk about investing in cannabis. Obviously, LEVO Oil is a product that you can fuse, as you mentioned, anything you want. But like a lot of your users have been with BTHC, cannabis, some sort of derivative of it. And just so for those who are not familiar with LEVO Oil, definitely check it out. I mean, just to give you guys some idea of how powerful this brand is, they have 5 billion organic social media shares, views, you name it. I mean, that's insane. I mean, it took like what, one TikTok went viral and you had how many million views on that one with the
I
nut,
don't even remember some millions though.
right?
It's yeah,
And then
TikTok's amazing.
just like organic, just being shared, right? You have a whole fan base called infusiasms. How do you say it?
Yeah, yeah. Don't curb your enthusiasm. Yeah, enthusiasts.
Enthusiasts, thank you.
Yeah.
Enthusiasts, a huge following, right? You have been featured in 83 print media articles from the Rolling Stones to other mainstream magazines. You're not only you can people buy you guys directly from your website, but you're in main retailers like Nordstrom, you're in Wayfair, Bloomingdale's, whole nine yards, right? Like, I mean, let's just for a minute just I want to like celebrate your success because being a home appliance at this level is extremely, extremely difficult. And you also got the house keeping award, right? Crazy, right? So I think like as someone who is not, I would say it wasn't until the last 2 years that I've been much more up to speed about cannabis and how to invest in it and whatnot. You know, obviously you are a company that is benefiting from this wave of cannabis, benefiting from the wave of social media. Like talk to us about this obviously also changing environment where regulation. Why now? Like, so to give you an idea, some investors have said to me, oh, is it over? Should we focus on
Mm.
crypto, NFTs? Like, you know, is it too late for cannabis? Talk to us about, if you think so, why investing in cannabis companies or funds and anywhere, anything in that world is still a viable investment.
Yeah. Um, Thank you for everything you said. Also, it's very
You're just
sweet.
fast. So this report is
I
fast.
feel like time is on our side. I mean,
Yeah.
we're at the cross section of several mega trends, which is really, really, really fun and cool cultural moment. Like I'm into it for that reason. But yeah, on cannabis, I think I see cannabis more and more simply as I'm in it. And I've spent obviously a lot of time in the weeds, the trade shows, at this and that. I've seen a lot of things. I do not think it's too late. And I think at a very high level, it's like, the cannabis had its time when like the plant was not so much a commodity. And it's been like, a very specific strain and this and that, super important. I still think there's plenty of people out there that do that, and that's amazing. But it is heading in the direction with legalization of being more and more of a commodity.
Mhm.
And so margin and business and all that will be a lot like other businesses. It will just start to look more like other mainstream businesses where brands are everything, or extremely important. So yeah, I think as those things clear up, brands are really important, and it's just still. I think there's always opportunity in anything that's still pretty clunky. So I think that area, marketing, is where cannabis is the most clunky because it has an incredible amount of infrastructure, an incredible amount of stuff that's out there, but not very easy ways because of the red tape to market it and get it to the consumer easily.
Yeah, got it. Super helpful. Yeah, agree on all
So I
that.
think huge opportunity. Yeah.
Yeah, I think investing in the brands that are smart about it, because to your point, like that's where the money is, right? The branding, but there's so many brands, so many,
Yeah. There,
right? Maybe not so
but
much.
there's a lot on this. If you look on like a state, I think it was a Bank of America report, like one of the first legitimate cannabis reports, like maybe a year ago or so, but they had a chart that came from somebody else. I don't know who to give credit to, I forget, but it was like, the top 5 cannabis brands by state. And it's just, in what other industry is it different by state that much, right?
Yeah,
So obviously when it opens up, it won't be that way,
yeah,
just like anything else.
yeah, yeah. Super helpful. Well, Chrissy, before I ask my final question, I just want to say thank you for not just, sharing your story, but I think growing up, I always think, oh, I can't wait till, we're all like late 20s, 30s, 40s, and so on. And, we'll look around my class and this person's done something cool and that person's done something cool. And honestly, it was just so amazing to hear I didn't know anything about Levo until we reconnected this year. And I'm just
Yeah.
so proud of you, honestly, for
Oh,
going
thank
for
you.
it. because the safe thing was just to be a good old IBM consultant and sit there and life would be good, time would pass, life would be good, right? But time would pass slowly but surely. And you didn't take the easy way. I think like you've always were a big heart and soul, and you really apply that to Levo. So I just want to commend you on like gunning it, going for it. You're not done. This is just the beginning of everything. So I just want to thank you for just not just being an example for everyone in our generation, but also for females, right? Like how many female founders are there really, right? In this world, in our world. And I think you set an example for a lot of girls growing up to say like, this is possible. There's a sea for us.
Oh,
So thank you, Chrissy.
thank you. Yeah, no, it's been fun to reconnect, and same to you.
Awesome. So my final question is, I think every person has a gift,
Drum roll.
right? Oh, every person has a gift. Right? Every person has something that comes naturally to them. And if you harness this thing that comes naturally to you, you can share it, benefit the world with it, spread joy with it. What do you think your gift is?
Ooh, surprise me with that one.
Don't be humble. This is
That's really hard.
humble. Okay, just honest.
That is really hard. I feel like such a square answering this way, but I feel like pattern recognition, like is like on some level, like I've asked myself this question before because I'm like, okay, you need to have answers for things like this. Like even when we were interviewing for finance jobs, like strengths and weaknesses, like you have to say strengths.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know, but that's really a thing. Like I really think like I'm so here to like get inside or put myself in other shoes or whatever circumstances and just try to see the pattern and deduce what's around it, and hopefully something that I would want to share with somebody else. Like I hope that I can give half decent advice to someone by like taking in what's happening in their situation, looking for any kind of patterns, because whether you want to say history repeats itself or people are all the same or whatever, I think that a willingness to accept that and then try to see it where it exists, but always being open is a thing. So I don't know. Sorry, it's like the most academic answer, but it's also kind of the square that I am.
Interesting, I've ever heard for sure. Pattern recognition, and
I don't know.
You are very thoughtful. Like, now that I think about it, like a lot of your questions that you ask are always around like you're planning ahead, or you're trying to think like what the outcome would be look like based on how someone's raised or their patterns or what they used to have done before. Like history tends to repeat itself. Totally hear you. So thank you, Chrissy. Again, congratulations.
Thank you.
This is just step one of as many steps to come because you are the patent queen.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I hope to make a lot of stuff. It'll be great. People will love it.
Awesome. Thank you, Chrissy.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you.